What if I told you the street you're living on right now might not actually belong to your neighbors? That the little coffee shop you visit, the apartments down the block, even the house you rent, could secretly be owned by a billionaire you've never even heard of. Here's the dark truth. Billionaires don't just buy yachts, mansions, and private islands. They buy entire neighborhoods, and they do it in ways so quiet, so hidden, that most people living there don't even realize who's pulling the strings. They don't need to knock on your door and make you an offer. Instead, they use shell companies, private equity firms, offshore trusts, and real estate funds to scoop up homes, shops, and apartment complexes by the block. Before you even know what happened, your whole neighborhood becomes part of a billionaire's portfolio. And here's the controversial part. When billionaires buy neighborhoods, they don't just collect property, they control lives. They dictate rent, reshape communities, push out the poor, and turn culture into profit. Today, we're going to expose 5 ways billionaires buy entire neighborhoods without you ever knowing. Point 1. Shell companies and secret LLCs, the invisible hand behind your street. When billionaires buy neighborhoods, they don't walk in with their name stamped on the contracts. They hide. They use shell companies and secret LLCs that make ownership almost impossible to trace. Imagine you wake up one morning and the old brick building on your corner, the one that's been owned by the same family for 40 years, is suddenly sold. You ask around, who bought it? The real estate agent shrugs. The papers just say XYZ Holdings LLC. Sounds like nothing, but here's the catch. That LLC might be a billionaire's mask. In places like New York, Miami, and Los Angeles, studies show that over 50% of luxury real estate purchases are made through anonymous companies. Why? Because it hides who's behind the deal. Billionaires use layers of corporations, often registered in places like Delaware or offshore tax havens like the Cayman Islands, to buy up property while keeping their names out of the public eye. And it's not just one building. They use dozens of shell companies, each one buying a property here, a storefront there. Slowly, block by block, they assemble entire neighborhoods without residents even knowing who's in control. Here's the creepy part. Shell companies aren't just about privacy. They're also about avoiding accountability. If a billionaire wants to evict tenants, redevelop buildings, or push through rent hikes, they don't do it as Mr. Billionaire. They do it as XYZ Holdings. That way, the community has no one to fight back against. The US Treasury has even admitted that anonymous shell companies are one of the biggest tools for real estate money laundering, which means your neighborhood could be owned not just by billionaires, but by oligarchs, foreign tycoons, even corrupt politicians hiding dirty money, and you'd never know it. So the next time you see a row of houses suddenly bought up, or a luxury tower appear out of nowhere, remember, it's not random. It's billionaires hiding in plain sight, turning shell companies into weapons of quiet control. Point 2. Private equity firms as landlords. When Wall Street buys your home. If you thought billionaires buying 1 or 2 houses was scary, wait until you hear this. The real game is when billionaires use private equity firms to scoop up thousands of homes at once. After the 2008 financial crisis, millions of Americans lost their houses to foreclosure. Families were forced out. Neighborhoods collapsed. Who stepped in? Billionaire-backed private equity firms like Blackstone and Invitation Homes. They bought tens of thousands of properties in bulk, often at pennies on the dollar, then rented them back to the same people who had just lost them. Talk about cruel irony. One day you're the owner, the next you're the tenant paying rent to Wall Street. These firms don't care about communities. They care about portfolios. They treat homes the way they treat stocks, assets to squeeze profit out of. Reports show that corporate landlords consistently hike rents faster than traditional landlords, add hidden fees, and skimp on maintenance. Why fix a leaking roof when you can just raise rent instead? And the scale is insane. In some cities, private equity firms own entire neighborhoods, streets where every house looks different on the outside, but every rent check goes to the same billionaire-backed company. Residents often don't even know they're all paying the same landlord. The controversy here is massive. Housing is supposed to be a human right, but when billionaires control neighborhoods through private equity, it becomes a Wall Street casino. People are no longer homeowners, or even tenants with stable landlords. They're just data points in a billionaire's spreadsheet. And here's the chilling truth. These firms aren't stopping. They're expanding. Every economic downturn becomes a feeding frenzy. Every foreclosure, a profit opportunity. So when you hear the phrase private equity, remember, it doesn't just mean finance. It might mean your home, your block, your entire neighborhood is owned by billionaires who don't even live in your city. Point 3. Gentrification by design. Billionaires turn culture into profit. When people hear the word gentrification, they think of hipster coffee shops, yoga studios, and trendy art galleries popping up in old neighborhoods. But here's what most people don't realize. Gentrification isn't an accident. It's often a strategy, and billionaires are some of the biggest players behind it. Here's how it works. A billionaire-backed developer moves into a neighborhood that's been ignored for decades. They start small, funding an art space here, a boutique cafe there. Then the condos arrive, sleek glass towers with luxury apartments marketed not to locals, but to wealthy outsiders. Suddenly, the culture that made the neighborhood unique, the mom-and-pop stores, the street art, the family-owned restaurants, gets priced out. But the real kicker, this process isn't random, it's engineered. Billionaires know that when they move trendy businesses into an area, property values skyrocket, and since they already own the land, they cash out big. Meanwhile, the locals who lived there for decades, they can't afford the rising rents. They're pushed out, replaced by the new rich moving in. Take Brooklyn, for example. Once known for working-class families and immigrant communities, it's now a playground for developers who built luxury condos worth millions. The same story plays out in San Francisco, Los Angeles, London. Entire neighborhoods scrubbed of their identity and turned into billionaire-designed profit zones. And here's the controversial truth. Billionaires sell gentrification as revitalization. They claim they're improving neighborhoods, bringing in jobs, making streets safer. But what they don't say is this: revitalization isn't for the people already living there. It's for the people they want to replace them with. Gentrification by design is a billionaire's favorite trick because it feels organic, like culture shifting naturally. But behind the scenes, it's strategic. It's billionaires turning neighborhoods into investment portfolios, using culture as bait, then cashing in when the locals are gone. Point 4. Buying distressed properties in bulk, profiting from disaster. Billionaires have a saying, never let a good crisis go to waste. And nowhere is that truer than in real estate. When neighborhoods are hit by recessions, natural disasters, or pandemics, billionaires don't see tragedy, they see opportunity. Here's the playbook. When families fall behind on mortgages, banks foreclose. When businesses shut down, landlords panic and sell. Property values crash. While ordinary people are scrambling to survive, billionaire investors swoop in with cash offers, buying distressed properties in bulk. The 2008 housing crash was a perfect example. Millions lost their homes. Billionaire-backed firms bought entire streets of foreclosed houses for pennies. A few years later, when the market recovered, those same homes were worth double or triple. Families lost everything, while billionaires turned disaster into gold. It doesn't stop there. After hurricanes, wildfires, or even during the COVID-19 pandemic, reports surfaced of billionaires buying up cheap real estate in devastated areas. They call it market efficiency. But let's be honest, it's disaster capitalism. People's tragedies become billionaire windfalls. And here's the scary part. These purchases are often so massive, they reshape entire neighborhoods overnight. What used to be community-owned homes suddenly becomes corporate-owned rentals. And because billionaires bought them at rock-bottom prices, they can afford to hold them, raise rents, or just sit on the land until the value explodes. This is how billionaires quietly take over neighborhoods, not in good times, but in bad. While everyone else is losing, they're buying. And when recovery comes, they're the ones who profit, while locals are locked out of the very communities they once lived in. Point 5. Land banking. Owning the future before it exists. Sometimes billionaires don't even need to build, they just need to wait. Enter the strategy of land banking. This is when billionaires buy up massive plots of land, often on the edges of cities or in up-and-coming neighborhoods, and then sit on it, leaving it empty for years. Why? Because they're not buying what it is today, they're buying what it will be tomorrow. Picture this. A billionaire sees that a new subway line or tech hub is planned for a certain area. Before the public even hears about it, they send agents to quietly buy property all around it. When the development finally arrives, land values skyrocket, and the billionaire cashes out, sometimes making hundreds of millions without lifting a finger. But here's the controversial part. Land banking doesn't just profit from the future, it controls it. Neighborhoods that could have grown naturally with affordable housing and community development instead become billionaire-owned territories. Prices are artificially inflated, making it impossible for regular families or small businesses to buy in. And it's not just cities. Billionaires have been caught buying up farmland, desert land, even entire towns, under the guise of investment. In California, a secretive group of billionaires was exposed for buying 55,000 acres of farmland near San Francisco, planning to one day build a private city of their own. Imagine that. Your neighborhood doesn't just get bought. The billionaire literally builds an entirely new one, and you're not invited unless you can pay the price. Land banking is the ultimate slow burn strategy. It's billionaires betting on time, knowing that as long as they control the land, they control the future. And that's what makes it terrifying. It's not just about neighborhoods today, it's about who owns the neighborhoods of tomorrow. So, how do billionaires buy entire neighborhoods without you knowing? They hide behind shell companies, they unleash private equity firms, they engineer gentrification, they swoop in during crises, and they land bank the future before it even arrives. The result? Streets that once belonged to families, workers, and small businesses now quietly belong to billionaires who may never even set foot there. Communities become portfolios, homes become profit centers, and neighborhoods lose their soul. And here's the question you need to ask yourself. Would you rather live in a neighborhood shaped by the people who live there, or one secretly designed to make billionaires richer? Because one thing's for sure, the next time your rent goes up, your neighbor moves out, or your block suddenly changes, you might not be dealing with the market. You might just be living in a billionaire's monopoly.